Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much. I'm gonna move some seating. So I'm on vacation still. I'm gonna just create seating. That look like you can see it. We blacked out. Let's see if it helps at all. It's even worse. Okay, let's try this side. That's better. That's better. Okay. So far it's quiet and I don't have sorry, people behind me that are walking behind me. But I am in Panama Beach. So is the noise too loud behind me? Okay.
No.
I've got my other headphones, but I gotta charge them. Just let me know if we answer that. So what are we working on today?
I think we're doing diversity.
Okay. So did last week, did we kind of go back and do a check on kind of what we know and what we don't know?
I think so, yes.
I did. And did we do okay with that? You have to remind me. Have
Uh,
sun on the brain today.
I feel like we did
Okay.
decent.
We did decent. Okay. So what did we okay, so we have done careers, yes?
No.
No.
We started with the human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
No, we started with theories.
Help and
Yeah.
relate.
Okay. So we haven't done careers and we haven't done, and now we're doing diversity and we haven't done research and assessment. Is that fair?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Coding, I can hear you. Anybody else?
Mhm.
I am charging my other headphone because hopefully I can use my other one shortly. I think you're much better about standing. Background. Okay, so did you study diversity this week? Or am I teaching you? Oh, Dr. Pam, we studied diversity, so we're great.
Teaching it.
You're teaching it.
Okie dokie. The Hellwig book doesn't give us a lot on diversity in general when it comes to like those generalities that we see. It does give us the language that we need, but some of those generalities are not there. So for example, when it comes to an Asian population, who would they rather see?
In Asian.
That's the only population that does not. Okay, so there's the term is shame. So it's more than embarrassment. It is a Eastern term, so we're Americans, the Western culture. So it's an Eastern cultural term that we really can't understand. It is that if I do something, it brings shame to my entire family. So we might have a kid that, oh gosh, marry someone that we're not thrilled with, right? But in this culture, it really is a matter of this is the worst thing ever. So when we go back to the Virginia Tech shootings, that's wow, now it's been like 25, 30 years, those shootings. And he was an Asian kid and he was failing class. And as opposed to bring shame to his entire family, he shot everybody up and he killed himself. Shame is that big of a deal. So that's the only population that would actually rather see someone that does not look like them. Everybody else would. Let's see if I can blur my background.
Dr. Graham, where does this start in our book? I was a bit confused.
So that one is not in the Hellwig book. Okay. So going over some terms that are just not in the Hellwig book. I'm going to pull up my social worker book because that's one of the ones that I really like to look at diversity in. It talks about ethic and emic, but it really doesn't give me a lot of stuff, those generalities that we need to know. And of course, in that chapter also is where we're going to find our LGBTQ populations. Share my screen in just a moment. Closing up some windows here. Share my screen. Okay, I'm gonna have to move because I'm gonna have to find a plug. I'm about to die. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, can you hear me and see me? Can you hear me and see me? Yes. If you hear the music behind me? No? Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. So sorry about that. When you learn to work while you travel, just try to find all the plugs. And right now I'm sitting in the bar. I might have to order a drink, just saying, because just because he might make me. I just want you to know, okay?
You go for it.
Okay.
Enjoy.
I have to, keep my space. That's all. That's all. Okay. Okay. So I'm not sharing my drive. Do you see it?
No,
What do you see?
You.
Just me. Okay. There. Back here, back here, back here. Go back here. There's the cap. There we go. Okay. It's a social work book. Do you see it now?
Yes.
This is just one of the better books when it comes to diversity. This is, if I didn't give you this already, this is the bachelor's level to social work. And I just really like this. There are some terms that you won't see definitely in the Helig book, and just a different way of looking at things. So I'm going to go over the diversity section from this book, and then I'm going to go back and pick up Helig as well. So as I pull this up, I'm going to talk to you about words like cisgender. Does that ring a bell?
Say it again. What's it called?
Cisgender. Can you hear me okay? Is it not loud enough?
No, I don't recall that name or
Okay.
that word. I'm sorry.
CIS, gender. What that means is what I am born with matches with how I see myself. So I have a vagina and I feel like I'm a woman. So that's where gender dysphoria comes in at. So euphoria is happiness. So dysphoria means I'm unhappy. So gender dysphoria are those LGBTQIA terms, and that's what we're looking for. So under those terms of and let's talk about those. So under those terms, we'll find those. So gender and who I sleep with are not the same thing. The gender is what I have between my legs, okay, and many times what I was assigned at birth. So I came out with a vagina, and the doctor told my mother that I was a girl. Okay. Now what we know is hormones don't always necessarily line up with what they see between my legs. So if as I grow up and I feel more like a boy, that's where gender dysphoria comes from. I'm unhappy with the sex they assign me at birth. It's not a new thing. It's been going on forever and forever. We just didn't talk about it. We also didn't realize the big connection between hormones and what you have between your legs. And again, I'm not talking about, who you sleep with. Okay. So literally back in the day, what would happen is if we really thought that someone had like a doctor botched a circumcision, or if someone was left with not a fully developed penis, they really would say, just take him home and raise him like a girl. It'll be just fine. Well, it's always been a thing. It's not so recently that we give it a name. There's another term. The old term used to be hermaphrodite. The new term is called intersex. You know that term? Okay, so intersex means I have both parts, right? Okay, so just some terms that you'll see throughout the book, and I'm going to go back and pick up the Helig book as well. But if we look at the term ethnicity, ethnicity is not the same as race. How are they different? Marcus, you and I are the same race. Are we the same ethnicity?
No, because ethnicity has like a cultural layer to it.
Got it. Marcus, where do you live?
Indianapolis, Indiana.
Marcus, did you know what sweet tea is?
Yes.
Like McDonald's, like sweet tea that it's not where you add sugar, but it's like diabetes in your arm.
No.
Okay, so in the South, sweet tea is like brown sugar water. So when we first moved here, and I would think, okay, let me order a sweet tea. I'm thinking they'll give me a tea with like 2 pink packets or 2 yellow packets, right? No. This is like diabetes in your arm. It's very much a Southern thing. Grits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're still, you got a little Southern in you. Okay. I live in Chattanooga, and in Chattanooga, everything is a Coke because the Coca-Cola company started in Atlanta and the bottling company is in Chattanooga. So orange Coke. Can I get a grape Coke? Everything is a Coke. That's the ethnicity. What's it called where you live?
It soda.
Anybody call it pop? No. So my northern Chicago, usually it's called a pop.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're like 50-50 here. Some of us say soda,
Okay.
some of us say pop.
Okay. So the first time I went to Chicago, my daughter said, what's a pop? So that's my ethnicity. I travel a lot. I go to, so when I was in Italy last year, and there are people that look just like me, and they open their mouth and they speak Italian, right? They're multilingual. So race is based on my genetics. So if you found my body, you know, CSI, and I found my body on the side of the road, and there were nothing left but the bones, they would still be able to tell from my DNA that I was African American. That is your race. Okay. Can you be multiracial? Of course you can, right? Your mom's dad, your mom is white, your dad is black, but that is race. Good. We do consider there are only really 3 races: black, white, Asian, and sometimes Native Americans have their own category. So if I'm Hispanic, that is my ethnicity or my culture. But there are black Hispanics, there are white Hispanics, there are Asian Hispanics. If you look at like areas of Peru and Central America, Guatemalans, sometimes you'll see that they are very shorter. They have the small eyes. Because what happened at some point is the Chinese Empire invaded the area of where in Peru is, Central America. Okay, so ethnicity is not the same as my race. It can be, but it's not necessarily the same. Now, my cultural identity, that term often identified as an entity or an identity of a group or a culture that I belong to. Okay, so you don't get to decide my cultural identity. I do. Okay, so Tiger Woods said he was Kabul Asian. Okay. You don't get to decide mine. I will tell you what my cultural identity is. So I think we have children many times that are biracial, but it really depends on whose family we're raised with, right? If I was raised with my black mother and, you know, and we never saw my white dad, then my ethnicity is, again, my culture identity may be as a black person. The culture identity really is something that a person gets to decide. So most often we'll use culture and ethnicity the same. Okay. Culture, racial, ethnic identities are passed from one generation to the next. Customs, tradition, language, religious practice, and of course our cultural values. The language, I talk about that always. So when it talks about culture, many times it's the food, it's what we do for the holidays. Okay. Does anybody celebrate Three Kings Day? Three Kings Day is a very Hispanic, but much more of a Cuban event. So many of our ethnicities, our cultures believe differently. So being from South Florida, what you would find is, you know, the end of January or Christmas decorations stay up until the end of January, the 1st of February, because they believe that the 3 wise men didn't get to Jesus on Christmas. They believed it was much later. So if I'm driving around through a neighborhood and I'm thinking it's February, why the heck do they still have their Christmas decorations up? It's because I don't understand the culture. And remember, it's our job to understand the client's culture. One of the questions that you'll see many times is, what do you do first? And what I always do first is recognize my own culture. Recognize if I get to know myself, then I get to know my biases much, much better. Okay? And all of us have biases. We can't pretend that we don't. But the question of test is always to recognize your own stuff. Okay? Over that differently. Okay. So these you'll see in the book, and also I'll put a link in your chat box. So when it comes to identity, there's a process of identity. I most often teach the one of color, but there's one for all three, well, black, white, and as well as biracial. Let me share that with you. There we go. Okay. My screen with you. Okay. Did you see my screen? So you'll see these terms on the test when it comes to racial identity. What I most often teach is the one for African Americans. I've seen the one about white Americans in study time, but no one's ever told me that it's been on the test. I can explain to you what it was like, especially for my children. That the first one was a pre-encounter. So my children grew up in South Florida, where if you speak English, you're cool. That makes sense. So they didn't grow up realizing they were a minority because they spoke, it's a very different world down there. So the pre-encounter for all little Black kids is, and actually all kids in general, white is right. Right? We see white people on TV, we see white images on TV, we believe exactly what that says. If everything that's white must be right. Then something happens, there's an encounter. So for both my adult kids, but my son, he would be able to hang out at Walmart at 2 a.m. with all of his white friends. And when he did that, nobody ever said anything. Not at all. Let him hang out at Walmart at 2 a.m. with his Black friends or Hispanic friends. The police always stopped them. There's some point where there's an encounter that you realize that you are not the majority. Am I sharing my screen? Do you see that? Okay. So then what happens is that point you realize, hey, wait a minute, I am not part of the majority. So then there's this immersion or immersion. During the transitional point in this model, the individual simultaneously decides to surround themselves with visible symptoms of their own race, identity, and actively avoid symbols of whiteness. The individuals begin to actively seek out opportunities to explore aspects of their own history and culture with the support of other members. So most often what that looks like is realizing, hey, wait a minute, you know what, I want to cling to Black people. I want to find my history. So for my daughter, she really, she was probably about 23, 24. She began to wear her hair natural. She began to really kind of cling into people that looked like her. And actually at the time, she'd actually lived in Belize where everyone looked like her. So at that point, I immersed myself in the culture. Then I internalize it. The internalization is I get my own sense of racial identity. I'm okay with being Black, living in and this again, this is when it's a majority white society. So immersion, then I internalize, and then I make that commitment to internalization. Okay. Anyone that's taken the test before, have you ever seen the white model on the test? When I teach it to my students, I make them whatever their background is, I make them do that model. But definitely there's a white identity model as well. That's by health. You did see that, right? The white identity model is by a Black woman and the Black identity model is by a white man. Just saying, kind of ironic, right? So with the white identity model, again, I won't go through it, go back and you can look through this, but I've never seen it on the test, but I'm just curious for you. Basically what happens is I start off with being in my own little bubble. And then what happens is I'm colorblind. I go out in society and then I realize that yes, people are different. And the ending goal is I learned that I can be white and be a good person. I don't have to be racist. I don't have to do any of those things. And I can still be proud that I'm a white person. Okay. So these theories are, again, I'll put those back in the chat box over there, but you'll see those stages on the test. Okay. Did I switch my screens? Did I go back to my textbook? Okay. So again, that's what it looks like. Development. Had those terms: pre-encounter, encounter, immersion, that I internalize. This also talks about physical disabilities. You'll see some of those terms. In the career chapter, it'll talk about if a client has a disability. So if they cannot do the job, then that is not considered discrimination. So if it says that you must be able to lift 50 pounds, and if you can't lift 50 pounds, that is not considered discrimination. Okay. However, you know, if it's a building with more than 25 people, the law does say that you have to have it has to be handicap accessible. More than 25 people, that's usually a test question. Okay. So we use the terms inclusion, participation. We're also going to use the term people first. Have you seen that? People first. I'm a person with schizophrenia. I'm a person with depression. So it's called people first language. So I'm not putting I'm not a person with disability. I'm a person first. I think we talked about Maslow a little bit before. Remember, those at the bottom pyramids are called the D needs now. Those are your deficits. And if we get to the top, they're called your being, is what you need to the laws to be a better person. That word physiological, right? That always means physical. Your basic food, clothing, shelter, a place to sleep. That's all that always means. Physiological, the PHSI. Those are often hidden in the questions. It'll talk to you about a client who's coming in and they want help with self-esteem, but they have no place to live. Well, that's what that looks like, is making sure that we understand those basic needs have to be met first.
Dr. Pam, you said the D was deficits. What was the E again?
B, the belonging. B.
Okay.
My B needs, let me go back.
Being. Okay.
To be a better person is what I think about. Okay. So I'm sorry, D are my deficits, and B are my just, you know, I want to grow. I want to be a better person.
Okay.
But the D are the deficit. I know, we learned math only 1,000 years ago. Like, how can it change?
Mm-hmm.
That's not fair, right? That's not how we learned it before.
Can y'all hear her clearly, or is it me?
It really may be me.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's not clear.
It's like almost kind of like a, I don't want to say a white noise in the background, but it's like a
There
noise here.
is, there's music in the background.
Okay.
Let me try my other headphones. How about that? Did that take out some of the background noise? Not really. That's
A little better.
just a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay, give me about 5 minutes and I'll move someplace else so I can get rid of the music in the background. I just have to have my computer to charge. I apologize. Okay, so when it comes again to my needs. Specifically. So just the kind of terms that we're looking for that many times we look for, and this is kind of where those stereotypes come in. Okay. So talk about disabilities. That term ADLs, you might see an elderly person can live alone if they can complete their ADLs. That's the daily living. Okay, so activities of daily living. Can they dress themselves? Can they make their own food? Should there be a fire? Can they get out? Okay, so that's one of the most common things that you'll see when it comes to elderly. Do remember it doesn't change. So if I was very sexual when I was younger, I'll be very sexual as an older person. Okay, my personality doesn't change unless there's some kind of neurodevelopmental or neurocognitive disorder. Right. So neurocognitive is a TBI. I have some dementia. I have Alzheimer's. Right. One of the number one thing that we see in our elderly is depression, and it many times goes undiagnosed. Okay. So we'll look at kind of some of the cultures. So the United States has a racial and ethnically diverse population. So what that means is we are a pluralistic society. You might see the term individualist or single. So like Asian populations, Japan is not a pluralistic society. Everyone pretty much looks the same and has the same belief system. We're considered a pluralistic society. We have different races, different religions. So white Americans, American Indian, and Alaskan Native, Asian, African Americans, Native Hawaiians, and other. That's if you look at ethnicity, not necessarily race. Right. So again, those are some of the terms that you'll see when it comes to just people in general. So white Americans, parents with young children, divorce is common, personal desire over family, parents try to be friends with their children to avoid physical and avoid physical punishment. So again, these are, you know, we can go as we go through these, you can say, well, I don't do that, or my parents didn't do that. These are the test answers. Okay, it's not about any kind of personality, it's just the test answer. American Standard English. Communication can be long-winded and impersonal. In the Helmut book, it talks about high content and low content. So for white Americans, there's a very low content, but lots of verbiage. So we talk a lot, but our words don't have a lot of importance. If we look at other cultures, they talk less, but the few words that they say are very important. In our white Americans, spirituality is a private affair, mainly Protestants, which is that whole kind of Christianity, including Catholicism. But white Americans are not known for being Catholic. Those are many of our Asian populations. The values, you see, capitalism, poverty is a war failure, and wealth is held in high esteem. Physical beauty is valued with white skin, blonde hair, and the thin body. Okay. So again, stereotypes for the test. Our American Indian, Alaskan Native, those are called our first people, not to be confused with person first language. It's our first language. Those are people that were, despite what Christopher Columbus says, people that were here prior to Christopher Columbus. So family has a complex family organization that includes relatives without blood ties. Okay. In one of my groups last week, I had a counselor who has moved to Alaska. $70,000 without her license. And one of the things that she talked about is they often live in little villages. And the whole village is the family. Okay. Valued over individual. The husband and wife show a tendency to communicate more with their gender group than with each other. So women will talk to women, men will talk to men. Communication is indirect, but still and quiet. They're comfortable with silence. Right? If we look at our Native Americans, if you remember the movie with Eddie Murphy and the tree of life, that every time he talked, the leaves fell off. That is still very much valued with our first people. That we need to talk. It needs to have words. Don't just talk to talk. That's very much an American thing. Spirituality is they are one with the universe. They don't see themselves any different than a tree or a horse or a cow. One of the things that as Americans that we did not realize, not that you and I did it, but when we moved the tribes from their land and put them someplace else, it was like leaving a child behind. That's how much they are in contact with human nature. Okay. So spirituality is a fundamental part of life. Interconnectedness of all living things, sacred, all creations are sacred. They do use traditional and Western healing practices, but it's really okay to have a natural healer. Right. So to go to my shaman, to go to the medicine man, many times it's a woman too, right? So we still use a lot of local ingredients. Now you have to buy them at the GNC, the General Nutrition Store. But those things have been common around forever with our Native American population, our first people. Right? Values are holistic, interconnection between mind, body, and soul. Okay. Again, our Asian families are many times going to be Buddhist or Confucianism, or sometimes we'll see Hindu. Anybody go to get their nails done and see them feeding the Buddha? Right? They always feed the Buddha, right? Okay, so to be blessed, you need to make sure that the Buddha is happy. So the Buddha can have anything. One time I saw the Buddha have a Snickers bar. Okay, so that's why the Buddha's so chubby. That was a joke. So anyway, the family is a very patriotic system. The wife has a lower status. That is the reason that, especially in China, when there was the one child rule, you wanted to have a boy. Because the boy's family is obligated to take care of his parents. If you have a girl, the girl gets married and they're still obligated to take care of his parents. Okay. We don't have that law anymore. The one child, one rule has been changed, but definitely that was very much part of it. Obligation to the parents and respect for the elders. Hierarchical family structure with strict prescribed roles and rules of behavior and conduct. It's changing now. There's a whole generation of younger, especially I lived in China for a bit and I taught English to Chinese adults. So we're seeing some changes. But by history, if you're a girl, you leave your family. There's no taking care of your parents, and there's no guarantee that you'll see them again. More modern, we'll see that people are seeing both sides of the family for the holidays. Again, the value, shaming, and obligations to adhere are mechanisms for reinforcement of cultural norms, adhering to the rules. Okay. So in China specifically, there is your credit score is based on your behavior in the community. So China is very much a dictatorship. They decide what you do. Everything from, like, depending on whether you live north or south of the river, is the temperature of your house. So it's not necessarily a credit score that I pay my bills. It's, are you a good person? Have you followed the rules of the Chinese, especially the government? Okay. Important notes: Asian clients may respond to psychotropic drugs differently. So we really used to think it was the size, that they were smaller people in general. And now we really don't know why, because we're seeing more Asian populations be more Western, and still knowing that they do respond differently to medication. So sometimes they require lower doses. Our job is, of course, not to prescribe, but it's important to know that many those dosages are being lower. That surprised anybody? Have you heard that before? That's where we say, no, Dr. Pam, you're amazingly brilliant. Oh, I know, it's the sound, right? The feedback in the background. It's hard to hear me, right? I apologize. African Americans, again, going from the stereotypes. We're not going from what happens in your family until you see your first and last name in a question. We really don't care. As a rule, African Americans have not trusted the government. So for many years, it really was children, African American children did not go into foster care. Somebody else just raised them. My aunt had my cousin when she was 15, and there was just no conversation. My grandmother raised her. We all, she grew up with us a little bit. Just no, we would never call you back. So it's strong kinship bond, including extended families and relatives without blood ties. Play cousin, which are sometimes we'll see. Informal adoption of children. Okay. So again, it's not, yes, we see African American children now in the system, but for the test, that is one of the last populations that you would see. You'll also very rarely see African American people in nursing homes. You'll very rarely see Asian people in nursing homes. That's the thing that you just don't do, right? Mother raised me, so we make sure that you know, hey, we take care of her. I know that. Spirituality is a huge part of African American community. It goes back to the history of racism and slavery. The African American church was the one place where you could be safe. We met with like Martin Luther King. There were things were done in the church basement. So the burning of a church is such a violation of anything sacred. It's the same with our actual Jewish population also. When we see people that are burning the synagogues or attacking our Jewish or putting the swastikas everywhere, the church has always been a safe place. Okay. So again, values, strong friendship bonds, strong work orientation, strong religious orientation, using formal support network, church or community, just trust the government. Okay. They feel like Big Brother doesn't care. And again, that will change, I think, as future generations come. But I'm 58 and I grew up in the generation of my mother and my grandmother. If the police came, we'd be scared. You know, my grandmother, that, you know, the police were not good people. You know, the white woman was raped. We go back to the Emmett Till, and that story's on Netflix, right? So it's still very much a part of at least my generation, younger generations. We all hope it'll change, but for my generation, it's still very much a part of it. Okay. Native Americans, other specific Islander. Sometimes these are in the same category as Native American people. Okay, that Western concept of immediate family is completely alien. So if we saw the fire on Maui, right, what we saw is those were communities. They weren't just related to people. I'm looking for my buddy who's homeless. I'm looking for all these people. It's very much a community. Okay, ties that bind cannot be broken, even by death. They cherish their ancestors with generations upon generations of lineage committed to memory. Okay, so spirituality, polytheistic. What does that mean? Anybody know?
Can you say it again? Polytheistic?
Theistic, right, means your think about your theology.
Right.
Okay, so many times our Asians as well as our Native Hawaiians will have more than one God. Right, so the God of the sun, the God of the water, the God of the whatever. Okay. So that's what that term means, polytheistic. Okay. And just a fun fact, Hawaii is the only state in the United States that has designated a native language. Hawaii as one of the Hawaiian as one of the 2 official state languages. Hispanic Latino population. They're known, of course, for extended families. Just a very different value system. For many of us, we would much rather, the Americans at least, we would much rather live with our 4 and no more. Right, family, you can't stay for a long time. You can come visit, but no, you can't be staying with us. Right. So Hispanic Latino population are very different. They decide, they really kind of look at what's important. So and sometimes also with our other population, what we'll see is our Hispanic population is really okay with, we'll all live together, as well as our Asian population, we'll all live together until we can afford to live someplace. Okay, I'm turning up the music. That means I have to go someplace else. Okay, so give me like just a few minutes and I'll log back in. I'm gonna go find someplace else to go.
question. What time are we studying on Thursday?
I'll be out of town Thursday, but you all are welcome to join.
Can anyone else do a session on Thursday?
I
Um,
can.
what time zone are you on?
Central Standard Time.
Okay, Central. Let me see. Thursday.
If you have a Google account, I think you should be able to create from your calendar. Anyone should be. You have Google?
I do. I'm just trying to. They rescheduled our football game from when we had the hurricanes. I'm trying to see what time I'm going to be back from the football.
Works. Okay, gotcha.
Give me 1 second.
I should be home by 7:15 Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. Yeah, we've been doing it around like I think 7-ish.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I'll just try to.
Eastern,
Huh?
I was gonna say Eastern time because I think everybody's on Eastern but me.
Oh, okay. So like 7:30. Okay. Thank you for moving it back for me.
No problem.
Okay. You hear me?
Yes.
Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, so I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Say something.
Yes,
We can
we
hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so why can't I hear? Okay, somebody else say something.
We can hear you.
I hear it. I see your lips moving, but I cannot hear you. Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? Right. Marcus, say something.
Hi. No?
I hear you, Marcus.
Okay. Like
Thank you for patient with me, guys. I'm not sure why I can. Okay, say something now.
Hello? Hi?
Now,
Hi?
there we go. There we go. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so let's try this again. Okay, so questions about anything I've gone over so far, just to kind of talk about the different populations and what to expect in that on the test when we look at those populations.
So I do have a question. You mentioned that the Native American and was it Native Hawaiian? Was it Native
Mhm.
Hawaiian?
Yep.
So you said that they were very similar in terms of the descriptions or the characteristics.
Mhm.
So I guess I don't want to say fear, but wondering would be
They're not trying to
how would
trick
we
you.
know how to say it again?
They're not trying to trick you. They're not trying to trick you. They will say something about, if it's Native American, it's most always going to be something about they don't make eye contact, right? They believe they're one with the land.
Mm.
Okay. There's going to be something about, what else? Most often the question I've seen is eye contact and the minimal language. You might see something about institutional discrimination. And what that means is when someone says to them, well, why didn't you go see a white doctor? Why did you go to your healer first?
Mm.
Okay. So most often that's what I'm going to see. They're not trying to trick you. They're really not. They're not.
Okay.
They're not going to make it that simple. It's not a guessing game. They're not. Okay. Polytheistic also, that would definitely not be something a Native American would be. So their only theology, they're spiritual. They would be praying to the God of the sun. Now praying to the sun, right? Because they believe everything on earth is as important as they are.
So you said they wouldn't be praying to the sun; they would be praying to the God of the sun.
So my Hawaiian people would be praying the God of the sun.
Okay.
Right. Do you remember? Gosh, what's the name of that movie? Joe and the Volcano. Remember that movie? A long time ago. It was a stupid movie. And the goal was if Joe jumped in the volcano, he was the sacrifice and he would save the world. Okay, so they believe in that kind of thing. Asian, Native Americans would not believe in that. Don't jump off don't jump into a volcano. Okay. Are Hispanics, of course. Okay, again, I said they would much rather live, 20 people to a house than we as Americans would like to live. Many of our Hispanics are going to be, Catholicism is still very much a part of their life. And Catholicism talks about only having, Catholicism talks the importance of, not using a barrier of birth control. Right, so using that rhythm method, I call it the guessing method because that's what it'd be for me. Oh, but they still value very large families. Especially look at our Mexican population. The Mexican population is still, as people are coming over, they are still very much living in a rural area. The reasons that, we had lots of children in the beginning was because we needed people to farm the land. So that's still very much a part of that community as well. They prefer to see someone that looks like them. They often speak Spanish, but do not assume that they wish to receive services in the native language. Because their last name is Gonzalez, don't assume that you need to refer them out to somebody else, right? You're still going to assess them first. When speaking Spanish, clients can be very expansive, expressive, friendly, playful, but in switching to English, speech may be more businesslike and guarded. That term is called code switching. It happens with African American populations as well. Code switching is that I'm going to speak a certain way to someone that looks like me and understands my language. And then when I go to a business meeting where I'm the only one that looks like me, then I'm going to switch to English. Hispanics, again, generalizations for the test. Not every Hispanic. I'm just trying to teach you to pass the test. Very loud. If it's a birthday party, the entire family is invited. There's no such thing as just having, you know, the immediate family. A family shows up in the emergency room and the entire family is there, grandma, grandpa, everybody. We are not going to send the grandparents away. They're all part of the family. Okay. With our Hispanic as well as our Asian populations, don't be surprised if father has to make the decision. That mom can't make a decision until she runs it by our father first. Okay, spirituality is Roman Catholic, but remember, you know, like every other ethnicity, just because I speak Spanish, that again, I could be from anywhere. I could be from Cuba, Central America. I could be from Spain. I could be anywhere. So getting to know the culture is just as important as learning the language. Okay. The same as there are different dialects in English, there are different dialects. Okay. Okay, those terms again. Sexual orientation. My sexual orientation is who does it for me, who gets my juices flowing. Okay, that is who excites me. That is not my gender. Okay, so we sometimes get those things confused between gender and sexual orientation. So my sexual orientation would be gay, straight, or what else?
Like pansexual.
Okay, pansexual.
Bisexual.
Bisexual. Absolutely, absolutely. What's the difference between pansexual and bisexual?
Bisexual is liking like two different genders, like male or female, and then pansexual is just like it doesn't matter. Like you're just
So
attracted, right?
go ahead, keep going. Yes.
You're attracted to just people like as they are.
So I'm attracted to most often a certain personality or something about people, and I don't care what body it comes in. Mm-hmm. Okay. I like smart people. I like tall people. I like attractive people. I like whatever I like. And it doesn't matter to me what body they come in. Did I change my screen? Do you see? Okay. And this is the entire list that you do not need. I'll just kind of go over some of the terms that you might see. These are terms in general. Ageism, that is discrimination against old or young. Okay, so if you see something that says, you know, Pam is 55 and she's got all the skills, and maybe in a career section, she's got all the skills it takes, but she can't seem to get a job. Okay, so there's an assumption there. There's probably some ageism going along. Remember, when I say a in front of any word, it negates the word. So a gender means that I'm choosing not to label myself with any gender. I'm not going to label myself as a male or female. I am not a gender at all. A gender. Okay. So the same thing is asexual. So if I say that I am asexual, that means I don't have sex with anybody. That term androgyny has come back. That was very much a term way back when. On Saturday Night Live, there used to be okay, before Mother, you were born. There used to be a character called Pat. And this is before we actually had any LGBT kind of conversations. And Pat, we never knew what Pat's gender was. So the term used to be called androgyny. So I've seen that make a comeback on the test. One of the other things I want to mention is the term two-spirited. Two-spirited has always belonged to Native Americans. They've always believed they had male and female inside of them. Always, always, always. Now that's considered one of the LGBT terms, but they've always considered that. That is not a new term for our Native Americans. If we talk about Carl Jung also, Carl Jung talked about the anima and the animus. He said all of us have the other gender inside of us. Okay, so again, not things that are new, things that we talk about more, but nothing new. So again, asexual, that just means I don't have sex with anybody. Asexual is distinct from celibacy, where the deliberate abstention from sexual activity despite sexual desire. Asexual means I don't have any desire. Celibacy means I'm choosing. Our priests that are celibate. Yeah, I said that. Again, bisexual, person whose primary sexual and affection orientation is towards people of the same or other genders. Some people may use bisexual and pansexual interchangeably. For the test, that's probably a really good answer. In the real world, if someone is pansexual, they will not be okay if you call them bisexual. But for the test, it's probably very much to know that they're pretty much the same thing. That's that word cisgender I talked about earlier. Okay. The prefix CIS means on this side of, not across. The term used to highlight the privilege of people who are not transgender. So we are lucky enough to be born in the same body that I identify with. Coming out is a process. Okay, so it is not, I wake up one day and decide that I'm gay. It's a process. And most often what you'll see is just making sure that you understand the process. The first thing I do is I'll come out to myself and realize that I am just different than others. So little kids, many times, like, all my friends like girls and I don't like girls. The scariest time is that when I reveal that to other people. So the coming out process may be to friends and family first. It may be to family first, whatever. When I reveal that first, that is definitely the scariest time to come out. And we do know that our LGBTQIA population has, our adolescents especially, have a very, very high rate of suicide. Okay, so if we see that an option on the test, make sure that we know that that is definitely a higher population than we would see with kids who are not LGBTQIA. Okay. To out somebody means to out them when they weren't ready to come out. Okay, so not okay, not okay. We don't get to out somebody. They get to come out whenever they feel like they're ready. Like I said before, that word dysphoria means unhappiness. Euphoria means happiness. Okay, so whenever I see that term, even like the MSE, when they say she was euphoric, it means happiness. She's like, right, she's, hey, look at that. And the term ethnicity, gay. Again, gender is my sex assigned at birth. Gender expression is how I choose to express my gender. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have to match my gender. I may feel like I'm a woman, however, I express myself wearing man's clothes. Okay. So how one express yourself in terms of dress, presentation of secondary sex characteristics, your breasts, your body, all those things, society and people that make up social characteristics that are masculine and feminine. Okay. Those are also social constructs. You'll see that term on the test. Social constructs are things that we as Americans or we in our society have decided this is how boys and girls should behave. There are no rules written anywhere. And what defines male behavior in our country may be very different than it's described in other countries. Okay, so that term is construct. We talk about in research constructivist theory. And all that really means is, again, that is something as society that we have come up with. Happiness is a construct. What girls and girls, the gender roles are constructs. Okay. So who says it's that women are supposed to, stay home with the kids? That's an American thing. That's what we wouldn't see necessarily every place else. Gender fluid. Okay, this is so inappropriate, but it's the best way to remember it. That Mounds Almond Joy commercial. Sometimes I feel like a nut, sometimes I don't. So gender fluid is sometimes I feel like I have nuts, sometimes I don't. I know, so inappropriate, but it helps you remember what that means. Okay, so I don't think Almond Joy would be happy with me using that song either. So a person's gender identification and presentation shifts, whether within or outside of society, gender-based expectations, being fluid in motion between two or more genders. So the third gender, of course, is non-binary, right? So I'm male, female, or I choose to label myself as neither one, and that's the X. So in the Latino population, I see that term Latinx. Latinx, again, means I'm not choosing to label myself as a male or female. Heterosexism versus homosexuality, right? Homosexuality is who I choose to I choose someone that looks like me. Heterosexual is I like the people that don't have the parts that I have, the opposite parts. That term intersectionality and intersex, those are just newer terms. If you went to college in the last, probably 5 or 10 years, you learned those terms. Intersexuality looks at the relationship between marginalized identities. So to be a Black gay woman is intersectionality, how those things all come together. Intersex, again, the old term used to be hermaphrodite. Okay, the new term is going to be intersex. I have both body parts. So hermaphrodite is an outdated and offensive term. Misgendering is definitely on purpose. So a kid comes to school and he tells the teacher that I am now Mary. Please don't call me Bob anymore. I choose to go by Mary. If the teacher still continues to call the kid by Bob, that is very purposeful and it's misgendering. Okay. If you haven't, you probably will work with parents who don't agree with it. Who will say that I raised a boy and he's going to be a boy. I don't care what happened. Anybody get any of those parents?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you handle that? My little boy ain't wearing no dress.
In front of the parent, I just, allow them to say what they would like to say. But of course, when it's just me and the student, they can be who they would like to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Something I heard this weekend that was very interesting, that Dwayne Wade had to be gay because no real man would let his child change their gender. Okay. So I'm not sure how those two things are related at all. I'm with extended family, so I just smiled and nodded. Okay. Okay, so has anybody else ever heard that? Is that the real man would never let his, right? Dwayne Wade, that's the right person that had his let his child have the surgery. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not making it up as I go on.
I didn't know that she had the surgery. I thought.
Yes, it was a very big deal. Yes, the child wasn't legally old enough, and yes.
So I thought that maybe the biological mother was trying to stop it. It's the last I heard. I didn't know that had been successful.
He must be gay because any real man wouldn't let that happen. So are gay men not real men? So I'm the family reunion, so I'm keep my mouth shut. So I'm like, okay, we'll go with that.
I have a quick question. Janetta, in your state, have they like changed or have they passed a bill now where, like in Indiana, like if a kid wants to change their name, we now have to like notify the parent, put it in the system.
You are funny. Janetta lives in my state.
I'm in Georgia.
So it's the same.
I was like, no, I'm not in Tennessee. But no, I mean, of course we'll call them their preferred name, but it's not any like paperwork that we change or anything like that.
Okay.
This is the middle of the Bible Belt. That would never happen.
Yeah,
one
we
of the
change
other-
in Maryland.
Yeah, so one of the other things also, I don't know about Georgia, but in Tennessee, you cannot change your, we will not change your birth certificate. So if your birth certificate says that you are female at birth, then you cannot get your driver's license changed to now say that you're male. So then you'll still have to have a driver's license that says you're female, even if you've had the surgery.
Hmm.
I don't know about Georgia, but we ain't got no people like that down here.
Because even like because they passed that bill, it obviously affects more than what they wanted it to affect. So if we've had students that are like a junior and they go by CJ, we technically now have to fill out a whole name request form if that kid wants to go by CJ.
Did
Like
you
it's-
experience any of the children that identified themselves as animals?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, we have a goat. We have a goat, and then we have a fairy.
And what does the school system decide about that population?
So we so I don't think it is in my school system. I don't think it's made like a big deal like I'm hearing in other areas where you have to kind of figure out where they go to the bathroom and things like that. Our goat talks. I've heard this varied behaviors, but I mean, our goat just seems to be comfortable kind of walking around just in the ears, the tail, and the hooves. But it was my first encounter was about 2 years ago, so I had to look it up. Furryism.
Yeah.
So I had to look it up. I actually did like a paper on it because I was very intrigued. But
So yes, and there were some school systems I heard doing very bizarre things that allow putting like litter boxes and
yeah, the
things
cat.
as-
Somebody was identified as the cat.
Yes.
So we have not. A goat goes to the regular bathroom.
Which that's one of the things that I think is so funny. In Europe, bathrooms are not gender-based. So you walk into a bathroom, and especially in where was I? I was on a ferry in Greece. And it was a women's restroom, and I'm using the bathroom doing my business, and a man comes in and he starts cleaning. No big deal. No big deal. It's very common to have different stalls, but the same place that you wash. So you walk into one room and there might be a urinal next to, the urinal would be in a room, closed, but there'd be a urinal and a toilet, and everybody washes the same place. So that is such an American thing. And I don't know how going to the bathroom became, a gender thing. Does that make sense? We all do the same thing there. So that's very much an American thing. There's really not. It'll just say bathroom. So that the first time I went, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. So okay, but where was I? I was in Italy also. In Italy, they don't have toilet seats, so it's still very much where you're kind of sitting on the toilet. There's no seat. And in the really rural areas, there's just a hole in the ground with a seat on the hole. And it's not gender-based. So I don't understand where people think that pedophiles come from the bathroom. Just my opinion. Okay, so. I think those are probably that. Oh, there's the term pansexual. not to be used to continue with polyamory. So that is when I love more than different people. Those are people like the sister wives that have more than one spouse many times. That's love, but that's not the same as sexuality. Passing, I like that term. So a passing term, especially because we used to be used in African American culture. If you could pass as a white, have to be a white person. So passing means that you are trying to pass as a gay or a straight person when you're really not. Your pronouns are he, she, or they. Okay. Him, her, or them. Him, her, yeah, he, she, or they. Him, she, he, hers. Him, he, him, hers. They, them, theirs.
And Zay, you forgot to Zay.
So I haven't seen it on the test. That's why I didn't go over it. Have you seen it on the test?
Well, I haven't taken the test, but I did learn
Okay.
it. So
Okay, yes. So I purposely skipped that one because I haven't seen it on the test yet. But it's very much a common, yes, a very common term in the real world. Okay, but I haven't seen it on the test yet. Go ahead.
What does they mean?
I'm not sure.
It was when I was.
I mean, I'm not sure of boy or girl.
Oh, okay, yeah. To me, it was seemed similar to they,
Mhm.
they,
Yep.
them.
Yeah. So see, it's like her or hers. So, but it's not HER. It's a kind of a term that can be the same thing as they, them, and theirs. So, but I haven't seen it on the test. No one has come back to me and said, and I truly try to interview my clients after the test, because some of those things you've never seen before, those are going to be the test questions for the future. I'll try really hard to make sure, and I just haven't seen those terms before on the test. Questioning is the process of coming out, right? Again, your sexual orientation is who you sleep with. Sizeism is a term too. Sexism, right? That's where feminist therapy came in, were first started, because men with power were seen to be men with, the white male society had more power. That's where feminist therapy came in. Okay, again, I'll put this in your chat box. Let's go back and pick up the Hellwig book. I just wanted to use the social work book because it really gives you a lot more information on those kind of terms that we're looking at.
You're gonna give us the social work book as well, correct?
I sure am. And especially when it comes to the human development one, I really like that book when it comes to human development. There's a term that you might see on the test. It's called spiritual bypass. Has anyone seen that term before? Spiritual bypass literally means that I am not going to worry because God will heal me. I don't need surgery because God will heal me. Okay, so, and again, we're always going to respect the client's belief system, but if that's what they believe, then that's what that term is. I don't need the doctors. My response usually is, I think God made doctors. But again, that's just my thought. You still hear the music? You hear the music behind me?
No.
I don't.
You're missing it. It's Elvis. So I'm at the, it's a timeshare at the Wyndham in Panama City, Panama Beach. But I think there are condos here also that people live here. So I think it's a older population because at the bar there were lots of, I don't want to sound sexist or ageist. Can I say blue-haired women?
Blue haired?
Does that mean old white women?
I never heard that term.
I never heard that before.
Me
Yeah,
either.
That's yeah, old term, I guess.
Mm.
Am I sharing my screen? Did I change my screen to the Halleck book?
Yes.
Okay, so again, some of the things we've already seen. This one is usually going to be on there about the changing of what society will look like. So the goal is, and I think the test still says 20, let me see if it's 2030 or 2050. 2050. That's what the test still says. Real life, we're talking like 2040, but the test is 2050. So what's going to happen is that the white people will be the minority, and non-Hispanic whites will, I'm sorry, minority groups, all of them combined, will become larger than non-Hispanic white population. A couple of reasons behind that. We do know that the longest, actually the longest people that live the longest are Hispanic women, even longer than Asian people. Not really sure why. And then what's our fastest growing population?
Hispanic, or
Got it. You got it. Because many of them again are Catholic. So lots of children. So as our baby boomers, who were again that mostly white population, still continue to die off, what's replacing is people that are non-Hispanic white population. So the black, the brown, that population. It's very funny that I have friends who are, I have a friend who's from Colombia, and she said she never knew she was brown until she came to America. And that was actually not a political stance, but that was a term under Trump. We didn't used to consider all Hispanic countries brown people. We do now, but we didn't always. So again, the median age, we have that baby boomers, people are dying off. Okay. More than 50% of marriages begin in cohabitation. However, it does not change the divorce rate. It decreases the marriage rate, but it does not increase the divorce rate. We're still at about 45% for first marriages, 75% for second marriages. This is over 40, so usually I see like 45. Right. The sandwich generation, what's that term mean?
taking care of your parents and your children.
Got it. Okay. Have you anybody in that situation?
Thank God, no.
Me either. So, but yes, and most often it's the woman. She's going to be taking care of her family, and most often her husband's family as well. Okay, gender role. Okay, gender role is the role that you're supposed to play. Okay, and we learn that by the age of 3. So gender roles are, daddy says, little boys don't wear high heels. Right, that's the gender role. Okay. Again, some terms that we see. So universal is a good thing in group, but not a great thing when it comes to culture. Okay. So universal says human beings, we are all biologically alike and we have the same needs. So people that say, I don't see color, that is not a good thing. That implies that if you are the majority of America and you follow the majority of the rules in America, then you are you're fine. Okay, so we want to see color. Ecological system, right? That talks about where you live, your nationality, we are American, what nation you live in. Okay, it's very funny though that other countries don't hold the same views of nationality. You would not see in Switzerland, especially, you would not see a Swiss flag hanging. I mean, yes, we go to the Olympics, things like that, but in your home, you just wouldn't do that. In America, we all proud to be Americans, right? At least I know I'm free. Some terms that you'll see when it comes to cultural class. Remember, the assumption that we're taking is that everyone is coming from that white middle class, upper class view system. Okay, so then that's the hat you need to wear when you're taking the test. So counselors and clients are a product of their respective culture and social class. In cross-cultural counseling, the beliefs, thoughts, and values of clients may be different than that culture's perspective. So the first thing I always do is check myself. I check myself. If someone is different than I am, I do keep my own biases in check. I mentioned earlier cultural pluralism, that in America we're a pluralistic society, whether it comes to religion or cultures. Okay, in other societies, that is not the same thing. Cultural norms. So norms are not the rules, they're the norms. We talked about norms in group, right? So there's no set of rules of the culture, but this is most often what we do in our culture. And if we talk about Bowen, especially, that's what Bowen said, is like, we need to stop that. We need to stop doing things just because we've always done it, right? That doesn't make it okay just because we've always done it. Okay. So then prejudice and microaggressions. So prejudice are feelings that you cannot see. Okay? You cannot see my prejudice. You can see my discrimination if I refuse to hire you, if I refuse to, if you get there suddenly and the apartment is no longer for rent, that's discrimination and that's illegal. But you cannot see my prejudice. Okay. Microaggressions are those small little things. They can be intentionally or not intentional. One of my coworkers said to me, when I go out, the only people that ever try to pick me up are drunk men and black men. Okay, is that to the same boat? So I need to take my little naive self and believe that's unintentional. But certainly that was a microaggression. You are smart for a little black girl, aren't you? Even things that, oh, he's Asian, you know, he's going to get a good grade. Right? Okay, so those are not the overt ones. Those are the kind of the covert things. The goal is microaggressions still hurt. They're small, like paper clips, right? Like paper cuts, right? They're very small. So a lot of my friends that are Jewish, and especially in the, again, living in the state, many times we pray in the name of Jesus. And that's not okay. If I work for the school system, or I work for the state and religion are supposed to be separate. Right? We should not be praying in the name of Jesus. Everybody doesn't believe in the name of Jesus, not for the state. What you do personally is up to you. Right? But that's not okay. Being from South Florida, they weren't called the Christmas holidays. They were called the winter holidays, right? Because there are lots of different religious beliefs that happen during that. So whether you choose to say Happy Hanukkah or Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas, as a person, especially if you're working in an agency, that's not okay. So that's not okay. And especially, again, I live in the South where everybody puts up Christmas decorations and bring a Christmas ornament. That's not okay. My religious beliefs, the same way they have no right with my client, has no place in my office either. Okay, we talked about racism, ethnocentrism. Remember, I think my ethnicity is the best. Americans. Americans are the best, aren't we? That's why them brown people keep coming over. We got to build a wall. I'm being sarcastic. Please don't go back and blow me up later, okay? I'm just doing it to help you remember. Okay? So ethnocentrism is we believe that we are the best. Okay, that my ethnicity is the center of everything, not my race, my ethnicity. Usually I have some people from Texas and they'll tell me how Dallas Cowboys are the best. That's also ethnocentric. Their ethnicity of being Cowboy fans, right? That's God's team. And I can debate that all day, but that's just what that means, how you identify yourself. Okay. White privilege is true in America. If you live other places, the majority of the people that have the power would have the privilege. So white privilege is in America because the other minorities are until 2040, right? Or 2050 are lesser or smaller than the marginalized community. So it refers to the subtle advantages, entitlements that European Americans experience, usually without their awareness. One of the best descriptions I use is when I travel, and I travel places that are especially a small town, or driving through a small town. I can't guarantee that I'll walk into the local convenience store or the local Dollar Tree and find hair care products for my hair. Right. So because if I own a business, I am going for the majority of the people. So many times you'll see the ethnic hair section is this small, depending on where you're at the time. I will say though, when you live in another country, when I go to the Caribbean countries, it's called the hair section, and it's mainly ethnic hair. The makeup is mainly ethnic makeup. So it would be harder to search for the minorities if you're looking for makeup for someone who's not of color. If you're in the Caribbean, that'd be much, much harder to find. So white privilege is something in America because that's the majority. Okay, but if you live in other countries, there's black privilege as well. Those terms, acculturation and assimilation. Somebody tell me what those mean. Right. Okay. I'm not keep going back and forth, but I really have to run to the restroom this time. Okay, so acculturation and assimilation, those are different than Piaget's terms. So somebody be prepared to explain those to me. Give me 1 second.
I know what they are. Oh,
I
she's
still go to the restroom. So okay, you can explain it while I'm not listening. Oh, I'm in the restroom. Go ahead.
okay. So acculturation is when you take on like the host culture, and then assimilation is when you eliminate like what your old culture was, and you only like identify with that new culture.
Okay, so acculturation, you're still keeping some of your culture, you're just incorporating the other culture.
Mm-hmm.
And assimilation is,
You don't even identify with what you used to be. You just identify with that new culture.
okay, I always get these mixed up.
I'm sure to say something different.
Huh?
I said she may say something different, but that's the way I remember.
I think that sounds pretty similar to what they're saying. Did you see a question like that on the test? Dealing with one of these? You did?
I did.
Kind of having to know both of them with the option. It's kind of what I'm multiple choice, both of them were option.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did she get it right?
I think so.
Did she get it right?
I think so. She said acculturation, they incorporate, assimilation, they absorb and forget their original culture.
Okay, did she get it right?
Yes.
Very good. So I don't have to teach that part. Very good, very good. Okay, so the first generation, what do they do? The first generation that comes over from whatever country, what do they do?
Acculturate.
Absolutely. And then the second generation assimilates, and that's really many times where the problem is, right? So if you've got this little Asian kid that's back talking his mother, what is he doing? Or what stage is he in?
Assimilate.
Got it, got it. Perfect, perfect, perfect.
Wait, explain that again.
Okay, so if a Japanese little boy comes over, right? They come over. So the second generation is most often where the problems come in, right? The first generation, they acculturate, they add their American culture to their culture.
Mhm.
But if I have a little Japanese little boy who begins to go home and back talk his mother, he is assimilated. He is looking like every other white little kid in America. Because in an Asian family, you would never talk back to your mother.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That's what the question will look like. It's not going to be just the definition. That term, culture encapsulation, what that means is I am seeing the world through my little bubble. Okay, disregarding any cultural variations, leaving some universal notion of the truth. I don't understand why during the riots, right, when with George Floyd, I don't understand why people get mad at the police. The police treat us all fair. I live in my bubble where that's how I get treated, and that's how I'm not able to see it from anybody else's viewpoint. Okay. So use of a technique, or in this example, use of a technique-oriented definition of the counseling process. For example, a Gestalt therapist may only use Gestalt techniques, no matter what the client's problem is. So if I'm looking at my culture encapsulation, again, I'm only viewing it from one lens. What we know, especially is with our Asian population, that most of our non-white populations prefer a much more directive approach, right? They don't want the Carl Rogers come in and just kind of tell me, let me figure it out myself. Tell me what to do. So if I am a Rogerian and my client comes in and they're Hispanic, or they are of a different, a different race or ethnicity than I am, and I keep using the same approach over and over because that works with all of my other clients, I'm in that cultural bubble. Okay. Do you know Emic and Ethic also, Janetta?
Yes.
What are those?
Okay, so how can I explain this? Okay. Emic is like counseling based on the client's perspective. So like I learn what the client would prefer. So I'm counseling them based on their culture. And then ethic is basically like using the, I wouldn't say normal, but like universal, or how can I put this in layman's terms? Using like the, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm just gonna stick with universal way.
Okay.
I'm trying to find not so text word, but
the way that I try to remember it is think of etiquette. Okay. So if we think of American etiquette, right? You come to my house and we eat with a fork and a knife. So if I assume there's something wrong with you because you don't use American ethic, right? If you eat with your, oh my gosh, chopsticks, right? Or God forbid you eat the rice with your hand, and I think there's something wrong with you. That's the etic view, because you're not following American etiquette or what I believe is appropriate. We don't want that. Okay, so it's very common to go to, so you know that many of our Asian families use chopsticks, right? Chopsticks doesn't do well with soup. So for many of our Chinese families, you just drink it out of the bowl. You just drink it. If you went to a restaurant and you saw somebody drinking their soup out of a bowl, you'd freak out. Like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with them? Why don't they have any manners? So that's an etic viewpoint. We don't want that, right? We want the emic viewpoint. I want to understand that this is what happens in their culture. And I did say to you that you always eat the rice with your right hand, because in many cultures, the left hand is for wiping. So you would never eat with your left hand. You don't eat with your right hand. Okay. This is what it is. This is what it is. Okay. If you've seen my videos, I probably mentioned this 1,000 times before. I have we had an exchange student that lived with us, and when she first came to live, we've had a couple, but this is one of our first ones. And she would, you know, use the bathroom, number one, not number two, and not put the toilet paper in the toilet. I'm like, what's wrong with this girl? What's what? But as I grew, and especially began to visit countries where water is very limited, you're not going to put the toilet paper in the water, because that causes the pollution. Your other bodily excretions are biodegradable, right? So if you go someplace, you're just not. When I was in Belize, we were staying on this little island, and literally the island was over the water. I mean, the toilet was over the water. You look down, and there was the ocean right beneath you. Right, so you put your toilet paper and any sanitary napkins in the trash can, and you do your business in the water. Okay, so that, you know, we ate fish out of that water also, right? So any paper products or anything like that then would mess up the environment. So again, that's, you know, we don't do that in America, but we don't have water issues. We don't worry about, you know, where our water is coming from. We have all of these solutions of how to sanitize and clean our water. Right. Okay. Etic and emic. Okay. Salad bowl versus a melting pot. Which do we like now?
Salad bowl.
And why?
Because it's all the cultures mixed together.
Not mixed together though.
Everything
right?
stays unique. Everything
Got it.
separate.
Okay. So when we think of the melting pot, it's mixed together, right? That's when we had like the turn of the century, when we encouraged all of the people from foreign countries to come over. And the goal is that we'd all come together and we'd all be one America, right? You give up your other stuff to be part of America. And now we don't want that. Now what we want is for everyone to have their own culture. It's really okay that, you know, that we do things differently. That's part of being welcoming diversity, not just tolerating it, welcoming diversity. Right. So in really cool areas that I've seen that are really trying to like help Hispanic families, and maybe they're not a Hispanic community. If you're having a hot dog event, you might serve tamales instead. Right. Because that is just something that if I really want to work with that population, I need to have that viewpoint that I understand that population. So the salad bowl is that everything is different, right? My tomatoes are yummy, and they are, I hate tomatoes, by the way, but they're juicy and red, and your cucumbers are green, and right, whether you like the spinach or whatever you like on your salad, it doesn't all taste the same and doesn't all look the same. But together, it makes a wonderful combination. So that's what we're looking for. So that's the salad bowl analogy.
So this question, so melting pot, essentially we were asking everyone, just trying to find ways to connect words. We were asking everyone to kind of assimilate.
Yeah. Oh, look at you throw it in a word. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that was part of the new America, right? You were coming over to be part of this new America. It's very interesting that, and I didn't realize this until much later in my life, that during that time, we welcomed the Black and brown people. Always, you know, at Ellis Island, we see lots of like people coming from England and Ireland, all those things. What they were looking for was actually tradesmen, people who had a trade they could bring. So there were lots and lots of Caribbeans that were welcomed at Ellis Island as well. So I've never in my life at school saw a picture of, you know, Caribbean people coming over, but definitely were very, very welcome. We liked black and brown people then. Right? But it was based on your trade, not your money. Okay. It's still based now on your money, not necessarily your skin color. If you have enough money, you can get in America legally. Again, multicultural counseling, that just looks at making sure that I check my stuff. That is my job. Okay. Let's see where we're again. So counselor training issues, right? Counselors should include a conscious raising component as an effective component, a knowledge component, and a skills. Effective, remember, is the mood. So if we really understand that everybody doesn't make eye contact and they may have a flat affect, it doesn't necessarily mean what I would think it to mean as an American. Okay. Learning about counseling within the issues of family members again. So to have someone who is of a I want to say an Indian descent, right? To have someone come to counseling and she wants to differ from what her family says, I have to understand within her system that that's something you wouldn't do. Right. So that's going to be something that I can't say from my viewpoint, well, you should just leave your parents or go ahead and marry someone outside of your culture, because those are very much cultural issues that are family related. So we don't, of course, we never offer advice. We have to make sure that we understand that concept as well. While men and women are socialized differently, men do come to therapy occasionally, and they actually benefit just as much as women do. That's usually a test question. Many women experience conflicts in the multiple roles. So when we talked about, you know, trying to raise my kids, trying to take care of the parents, being in the sandwich generation, all of those things, and men most often will come that it's career related or because their wife or someone has made them come. Many times male groups especially will stay on this as they deal with their problems cognitively instead of effectively. So that's called on the thinking level, not the feeling level. So what we know is that women will deal on the feelings level and men don't. That's sometimes called intellectualization. Intellectualization is that defense mechanism where I stay on the feeling level and I don't, the thinking level, I never get to the feeling level. Okay, so we've gone over all of those things, the definitions. An ally is someone, that's what the A stands for in LGBTQIA. The A stands for the ally. Those terms, the pronouns. 2017, 4.5% of Americans identify as lesbian or gay. So you won't see anything different than that on the test. That's the latest stats that we have. This is Stanley Strong. Stanley Strong talked about, he viewed counseling as an interpersonal influence process. The counselee, so that's your client, they view the counselors as having these characteristics: expert, attractive, and trustworthy. So I've seen this question. It talks about even like group leader, like what are you looking for in a group leader? What are you looking for in a counselor? Those are the ones. Someone who's attractive, someone who's trustworthy, almost like that halo effect, right? Oh my gosh, this person must be perfect. So that would be the same answer if it talks about, you know, what I like about a group leader. I haven't seen these terms on the test in a while, and I never remember what they totally stand for. Yavis and quid. Yavis talks about the kind of clients we like to see: young, attractive, verbal. And I'll remember with the this one is Q is the quiet, ugly, and old. Indigent means poor. So those are the clients we prefer not to see. But I haven't seen those acronyms in a long time. What's this one? Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Somebody tell me about that.
This how you're motivated. Are you motivated internally within yourself or externally through, it could be through rewards or other things?
Okay. So then the way that I usually describe it is when, and this is not always again true, very stereotypical, but when it comes to cleaning the house, women will do it because they enjoy a clean house. So the motivation comes from the inside. Men will do it so the women won't complain. Okay, so intrinsic means the desire comes from inside of me. Extrinsic means there's outside stuff pushing me. So when we're talking about taking the test, many times I'll ask you, so why do you want to pass? What's it about? If it's about your job and you'll lose your job if you don't pass, that's extrinsic. Okay. If it's intrinsic, that means that it's because I just really want it on the inside. It may be about a career change. It may be not about that, right? But it's still about the where does desire come from, extrinsic or extrinsic? If it is extrinsic, so that means the control is outside. I'm more likely to feel like that I don't have. I'm not able to control my own fate. And if that's the case, then I feel like that most likely depression can come from there. So if I feel like no matter how hard I study for the test, I will never, ever pass, that's extra, that's external control. That I can try as hard as I want to, but the test is out to get me. That's what that means. Okay. So internal control is I believe that I can change it. If I study hard enough, if I listen to Dr. Pam, if I do all the things, that I can control it. So extrinsic control feels like I don't have any control, and that most often leads to depression. Okay. Attribution theory. So attribution theory talks about situational or what's the term? Bias. So attribution theory really basically says that I'm attributing things in, I'm going to always make myself look better. Let's pull the slide for that one. So it's sometimes called the fundamental bias error. Attributes are characteristics of myself or other people that we attribute to other people. And I'm always going to make myself look better.
On the test, will it say fundamental bias or fundamental attribution?
Either, so bias is one of the ways that we do it. Okay, let me show you this one. Am I sharing my screen?
Mhm.
Okay, so then the attributions can be situational or disposition. What I try to say is, so let's say that I have a car accident, somebody hits me. So if I say that it is a situation, it is just someone hit me, it's an accident, no big deal. But if I have the dispositional bias, that means I'm going to say something like, well, old people can't drive. I'm going to talk about you as a person as opposed to this just situation. So that's where the fundamental attribution error comes in, is when I am then blaming you personally for something that happened, as opposed to saying it was just an accident. So that's the fundamental bias error and where it comes from. One of the other things that you'll see, let me show you another one, is I'm always going to make myself look better. That's another part of attribution theory. Looking for one. There is another part of that attribution theory talks about that I'm always going to blame others. So if I take a test and I pass, here we go. If I take a test and I pass, I'm going to say, wow, I had the hard test. If I see someone on Facebook and I think, oh my gosh, they passed the test, I'm thinking they had the easy test. So I'm always trying to make myself look better. So this one is, again, dispositional, something about your disposition, and then situational, talking about just the situation. So the dispositional error would be, again, on Facebook, when I say, oh my gosh, I passed the test on the very first time. I'm not going to think that they studied. I'm going to think that they had the easy test. There's something about them that was different. If I pass, I think, wow, I had the harder test. I studied, I deserved it. You see my screen? Am I sharing that? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Stop sharing in general. Okay, and a couple other things in this chapter I want to go over. Ask me questions you've seen in study guides, questions you've seen other places.
So are we still under diversity when we start talking about okay.
Yeah, all of these are shown in the exact same chapter. This is one of the smallest amount of points, but still, a lot of my people just don't do well. I think because we think, oh, there's not that many points there, I don't need to really study for this. But definitely, you don't want to give up those points. You just don't. Ethic and emic, allo and autoplasty are also things that you'll see on there. Let me see if I can fill those up. Okay, get back to seeing my Howard book.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. That self-fulfilling prophecy, you'll see that also under research. Self-fulfilling prophecy has to do with what it's called the Pygmalion effect, or sometimes the Rosenthal effect. You'll see those under research. Okay. the IDEA, right? That's the Individual with Disabilities Act. Very interesting. Before the 70s, the states did not have to educate everyone, especially small rural communities. If we didn't have the resources to educate people that had the low IQ or the high IQ, we really just sent them home. So it started off in the early 70s. 1997 is where the IDEA came in at. So it says that free appropriate education between ages 3 and 21. So if I have a kid who has issues at birth, we're going to get them at school at 21. I'm sorry, at 3, and they can stay until they finish their 22nd birthday. So the end of the end of the year that they turn 21. Okay. Least restrictive environment, you'll always see that because sometimes it'll say most restrictive as a try to trick you, but it's the least restrictive environment. So if I can function in a regular classroom, that's where I need to be.
Question. So it's saying the IDEA 2004, and it was saying in 1997. So is there a year that we should be focusing on?
No. All I wanted you to know is that the fact is that until the 70s and that's on test question, until the 70s, schools didn't have to do that. Okay. So then in 94, it happened, but the one you'll see now is the IDEA, and they're going to ask you what year. Okay. All they want you to know is between 3 and 21. That least restrictive environment. So that means, again, if I can function in a regular classroom with support, I should be there as opposed to a secluded or an isolated classroom. Okay. Children with qualifying disabilities may attend private schools, and those institutions are also eligible for services. So if my county does not provide the services that I need, and I end up going to a private school, the school still needs to provide the testing services and things like that. Let's see here. Supplemental funds for eligible children for birth to 2. ADA. I think I mentioned earlier, it talks about the number. Prohibits discrimination in public and private transportation. 15, that's the number. The act prohibits employers of 15 or more. So if you have more than 15 employees, you have to follow the ADA rules. Okay. The only reason for that is if you own a historical building. Okay. So if it's been designated historical building and you can't change the outside, then you don't have to put in a ramp. Older adults, talked about them before. Things don't change. At age 65, the individual life expectancy of about 18 years. So 16% of the population is 65 or older. Again, that's that baby boomer generation that's getting smaller and smaller. Ages, and we talked about between 60 and 70, many have a physical impairment. Some intellectual decline is not inevitable. Everyone else doesn't, just because I get older doesn't mean that intellectually I change. Personality traits remain stable. I said that before. Older workers, that's also covered a lot in careers, tend to have longer unemployment periods than younger ones. Their intellectual function is not impaired. Okay. There's a persistent and progressive decline on speeded tasks. What we know in general is we are at our physical peak at 30. And as I get older, my physical peak begins to go down. The section is new in the Howard book. It just talks about child abuse. One of the most common is going to be neglect. Okay. Child abuse occurs between ages of 17 and 13. All those things that we report. The opioid crisis, I haven't seen this make the test yet, but know that the what's it called? What's the stuff that stops it immediately? Narcan. So yeah, so now we're talking about making sure that, you know, friends have Narcan with them, that sometimes when you go pick up your opioid prescription, that Narcan is available, that stops the high immediately. Teenage suicide, that's still the highest one. At greater risk of suicide in this age range are American Indians and Native Alaskans. So we talked about them, lacks of jobs, higher issues of alcohol and drug use in that population.
Do they ask on the test what ethnicity, like what suicide is high in which ethnicity?
I haven't seen that yet. I really haven't. This is the newest Hellwig book, but I haven't seen that yet. In 2017 indicates that suicide rates in general, not just for teenagers, are increasing in less urban and more rural areas versus urban areas. So what that says is we're seeing more increase of suicides in the rural areas as opposed to the urban areas. We used to kind of only see it in cities. And now we're seeing it kind of more in the rural areas, and that isolation has a lot to do with it. Clients are expressing and exhibiting more stress and anxiety. This talks about climate change. And again, I have not seen a question on that yet. What I have seen a question about is something like, what do the counselors play a role in the environment? And yes, so that's part of that. There's a new school of like environmental counseling or environmental psychology, and just really keeping that in mind as we work with our clients, how the environment is changing. Okay. Cognitive dissonance, that's a term that we've seen before. Cognitive dissonance really means I have two decisions that I cannot decide. I've always had this one belief, and now this other belief has come in, and these two things are not lining up. Okay, so that's Fessinger and cognitive dissonance. Most often it's one of the reasons that people come to therapy. So for example, I've been married forever and forever, and I am so happy with being married, and I think we'll live together, and then we go through a divorce. So this thought or this belief system I've had for the entire time is suddenly changing. Okay, and that causes a very much uncomfortableness inside of me. You know, Kubler-Ross, DABDA, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Masters and Johnson, way back then, they're the ones that did the research of people that were actually having sex in like a clear box, and people could watch them have sex. Not people, but the researchers could have them watch them have sex. Very controversial in the 70s. But again, so men and women may be sexually active into their old age. I had a client call me actually today, and she wanted to know my opinion. The father was 74, and he's the biological father of a 3- and 4-year-old. Single biological father, the mother left. Okay. The importance of nonverbal communication. Those terms we'll see. Paralanguage, I think we saw that earlier maybe. These are the other vocal cues individuals use to communicate. The loudness of your voice, the pauses, the silence, the hesitation, the rate of speech, the inflection. So inflection, the paralanguage are the things other than the words. Okay. Or someone asks you a question and you take a minute to think about it. So paralanguage are all of the terms that are used other than the language. That's what we're missing in texting, right? Is that paralanguage. And we can use caps and things like that, but definitely that's something that we miss in text. There's that word term androgyny before. Program accountability. Most often we'll see this under the research terms that talks about our summative and our formative. So we'll go over that at a different point. A lot of stuff in this chapter. A lot of stuff. So watch this video 17,000 times. I'll put some chat box things in the chat box, and really kind of come back and go over some test questions, looking at all this terminology and the verbiage that we use today. A lot of stuff in here, a lot of stuff. Okay, ask me questions. Okay. Okie dokie. So we'll pick up next week just on some questions of this. I'll put the things I used today in the chat box, and also I'll put some flashcards in there.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Safe travels.